And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of the Next Gen Racing Formula Fixed FF1600 series, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And today, we take a look back at all the racing action in this post-round broadcast from round 5 of 6 in the Norwegian region around Rakkestad at the infamous Rudskogen Motorsenter circuit, a circuit that populates the southern half of Norway and the country's premier racing circuit. It has evolved over its history and recently redesigned by Hermann Tilke. It is a circuit that puts technical prowess above everything else. 14 corners weaving their way on the vulnerable asphalt all the way up and down the local hilly terrain and in amongst the Norwegian forestry, and with corners being the focus and only one extended straightaway, overtaking is going to be limited to battling through the corners. But with the FF1600 machines being so unstable by default on even the simplest of tracks, it's going to be clear that mistakes will be plentiful, and it's those mistakes that will be punishable by a potential overtake into the next corner sequence. But as we get ready to go racing today in this post-round broadcast, where the focus is on all the action as if it were live, indeed the racing action occurred as of what was Thursday the 25th of May, we're bringing it to you as if it were live on Saturday the 27th of May. We do a little bit of housekeeping to let you know that if you know the results from the racing, then we do ask in any of the respective broadcast chats you avoid putting those results in there to avoid any spoilers for the guys and girls tuning in at home. And I, as your host and commentator, do not know what's happened as well in the final practice session, which is currently ongoing, alternatively in the qualifying and the race sessions. But let's not get ahead of ourselves as we welcome you all, whether it's via the two official Next Gen Racing media platforms, firstly on YouTube at youtube.com and search for Next Gen Racing, alternatively on Facebook at facebook.com/ groups/Next Gen Racing, or lastly via the unofficial media platform of Twitch at twitch.tv/TX141. We welcome you all to the broadcast. We can see all three chats all together here in the commentary booth, and will allow me to introduce myself as your host and commentator. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain the Spit, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action tonight and indeed for the entirety of the series. But what about our schedule for today? Times in British Summer Time, that's BST, or Universal Coordinated Time +1 at UTC +1. Well, as we can see, in just under 13 minutes time, we'll be going into our qualifying session at 15 minutes in duration with all our drivers out of the circuit. And whilst we do have a limited field of 8 drivers today, we expect the racing to be close quarters, with the fact there's major points up for grabs and the circuit will be relatively empty in qualifying, and that gives our drivers plenty of opportunity to put in their optimum lap. After that, we'll make our way to the grid for the first race of the day, the short sprint, 15 minutes in duration for race number 1 at approximately 5:30, and then after that we'll take a brief breather before returning at what will be a 10 to 6, I should say, not 10 to 8 for our second race, and that'll be the 20-minute long sprint to conclude proceedings here in the 5th round of the season. But as our drivers get set, and it's a relatively nice day in Norway, with an ambient temperature of 20 degrees centigrade and a track temperature currently at 26 degrees centigrade, and we've got a bit of cloud coming over the circuit very gradually. Well, let's take you through the calendar thus far and what still lies in wait. And as we can see now, we make our way towards the very end of the schedule, with this being the penultimate round. But we started off all the way back on the 27th of April with round number 1 taking place at the legendary Alton Park circuit in the United Kingdom. There it was all about our drivers coming to grips with their chosen machinery, and we saw battles aplenty, but the one name that stood out the most right at the front of the field was Jason Cooper, albeit Jason Cooper only being able to attend for the first round, and we have missed him on circuit over the course of the remainder of the season, but still setting the pace for everyone to chase after, and the likes of Chris Knox, Chris Midmark and also Vito Potts all given hot pursuit. Then round number 2, we made our way to the United States of America for the first time this season for none other than Lime Rock Park Circuit. Located in the state of Connecticut, the circuit really delivering with close, frantic action from start to finish, and many a driver there going 2-3 wide into the opening corner and trying to sweep the way to victory, and indeed those who came out on top, well, it was definitely a race to be remembered, whereas others had difficulties, including the likes of Mark Sykes and Callum Jenkins in the Pram class. Then round number 3, we brought that to you live on what was the 11th of May. We were in Japan for the Tsukuba circuit, and what a round of racing we had in Japan. We saw plenty of battling. We saw one driver in particular who delivered the ultimate pace compared to the rest of the field, and that was Chris Knox, but having to charge after many a driver in the feature race to try and come out on top, could not quite make it, and in the end Daniel Lewis was able to come away with the win in the second race of the day. And then round number 4 to go into the second half of the season, with there being no mid-season break, we made our way back to the United States of America for the one and only WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. Located in the state of California, the West Coast circuit delivering as it always does, and our drivers there having to try and find a way to stay on the black stuff and avoid going off onto the sand or the grass. But there were plenty of incidents there, and now they'll be looking to calm things down today at the Rudskogen Motorsenter circuit and get themselves the best possible points on the board to set themselves up with the championship momentum going into the season finale next week. It'll be round number 6 of 6 on the 1st of June, brought to you live, and that'll be at the Oran Park circuit. We bring it back out the time vault, we bring it back to life, now currently a housing estate, but in the past a wonderful Grand Prix circuit, and we'll see our drivers take on the Australian circuit as of the start of June. So plenty of races still to come, and we've had a plentiful amount of action all the way through the season, and it really has set the tone all the way through. But as we come from our season to our standings going into tonight, well, let's take a look at the Drivers' Championship overall first. As we can see in the overall standings, it's Chris Knox who leads the way by 16 points over Chris Midmark. It's the battle of the two Chris's at the front of the field, with Knox seemingly having the pace advantage, but Midmark having the ultimate consistency, and therefore it really does come down to the two different flavours of driving. Albeit that's not to say that Knox does not have consistency of his own, but losing some key points last time out at Laguna Seca in the feature race, and he'll want to try and avoid those inconsistencies in order to wrap this championship up. Albeit we're not going to be seeing Knox out of the circuit today, so therefore this is a prime opportunity for Chris Midmark to level the playing field going into the season finale. And then Isaac Doble and P3 a further 15 points behind and not in attendance either here at Rudskogen. And for the member of the Doble family, it's all about now batting for P3 when he comes back for the final round of the season. We then have a 24-point gap to Daniel Lewis in P4, and he's well clear of Jamie Dory, who wraps up the top 5, with Dory right now finding it being a hunt to stay in P5, with Joseph Doble only a further 8 points away. There's Vito Pops Ian Pearson, the Brazilian driver, all known and loved up and down the paddock, and rocking on as he always does in that P7 position. But the difference will be now than the fact that he did have some difficulty last time out at Laguna Seca, and will that difficulty continue to plague him with regards to getting control of the car? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Adam Delman, Jason Cooper and Gareth Williams complete your top 10, with then only a 6 further points back to Mark Sykes in P11, while the leading Pro-Am drivers and trying to make his way into the overall top 10 after today's races, and only 4 points clear of his Pro-Am Championship rival Callum Jenkins, and more of that shortly. But behind the Team Hard Esports drive, we have Nick Clemens P13 on 42 points, one off the top 2 Pro-Am drivers, with Daniel Stimman and Alan McCain completing your top 15. And it's Josh Brown, Connor Miles, Daniel Lewis 9, Lars Fischer and Stefan Vessels to complete your top 20. And the battle is on there to try and make your way into the top 15, if not get into the top 10 come the end of the season. And Vessels in particular there trying to hold on to that last spot inside the top 20. But from our 11-point South African driver, we make our way to an 8-point British driver, John Meredith, on it's there the P21 position, and he's 1 point clear of John Higgins Jr., the last driver to have scored points thus far this season. Then on 0 points, Marcus Hudson, Costa Trascontinantino, Eric Kerzanel, Furkan Kagulu. We also have there Gareth Hicklin, Gavin Allen, Jesper Tan, Chris Vasilov, and we also have Lewis Benny P31 ahead of Loving Kishore, Mark Arrowsmith, Mark Hall, Martin Shirley, Ole Martin York, Rhys Saunders, Sam Smith, Stuart Brearley, and Teague Ashburn completing your overall championship standings. As we then come from our drivers' overall championship to the individual classes, we start off with the Pro Championship. And here we can see that Chris Knox leads the way by 19 points over Chris Midmark. And much like in the overall Drivers' Championship, it is the chase now for Midmark to try and close the gap, and he has the prime opportunity to do so with the absence of Knox here in Norway. Isaac Doble, 12 points behind when the points are adjusted, and also looking for that potential hunt for the top 2. But by not being in attendance today, he will be relegated himself effectively to a battle for P3 come the end of the season, with Daniel Lewis there in P4 on 116 points, trying to close to the top 3, but steering clear of Jamie Dory. And you see the gap between P4 and P5 a little less pronounced here once the standings are revised, with there being a 26-point delta, and Jamie Dory can quite easily overhaul that if results go his way. Joseph Doble a further 7 points behind, with 4 points of him, Vito Pops, and we have Gareth Williams there, P8 on 73 points, trying to stay clear of Adam Delmont with the 5-point gap there between the two of them, and Nick Clearance completing the top 10. Outside the top 10 by 6 points, it's Jason Cooper, and John Higgins Jr. completes the standings. Then coming onto the Pro-Am class, and the complexion of the top here, it's 5 points that separates the two biggest belligerents of the class. Mark Sykes leads after difficulties at Laguna Seca, and Callum Jenkins conversely continued to keep the hunt on. Both drivers have had their struggles, but they've also also had their successes, and will we see one of them potentially favour the Norwegian circuit today, or will they both find favour here, or will they both struggle, and could we see the likes of third place driver Daniel Stimmen rise to the challenge? Well, that is going to be on their minds, and whilst Daniel Stimmen is an outsider in the championship, his hunt is very much alive. Behind the top three, it's then a further 17 points to Alan McCain in P4, with John Meredith completing the top 5 on 32 points, 20 off of the top 4, and it's a point to Josh Brown. Daniel Lewis completes the run to P7 on 58 points, 7 clear of Connor Miles, with Lars Fischer and Stefan Vessels completing your top 10. And outside the top 10, based on what is their grand total of 22 points, Daniel Fritz, who should be listed as P11, headers Marcus Hudson, and it's Sam Smith who completes your Pro-Am Championship standings. But as we then come from our standings, we go to our circuit for today to talk a little bit more about it, and it is of course none other than the Rudskogen Motorsenter circuit. With only one layout, the Grand Prix layout, and located near the town of Rakkestad in the region of Viken in Norway. This circuit lesser known compared to most circuits on the international calendar, but is a circuit that should not be underestimated, as the circuit map provided by iRacing.com will go to show. Thank you to them for the wonderful simulator and the circuit maps that come with it. And to elaborate on why this circuit should not be underestimated, well, as our drivers make the way around, they'll notice there's only one extended straightway. That is the start-finish straight. And as they head on around, it's going to be a focus of a multitude of corners, and a lot of these corners being blended together with significant elevation changes. So therefore, you do need to manage direction change and elevation change in cohesion if you want to try and come out on top. Now, it's also a wide road surface around here, even with the corner sequences, so that means there's plenty of space, and you need to use every millimetre of road width in order to take the optimal racing line. And as our drivers make their way down towards turn number 1, they'll start with a sharp left-hander, which will feel quite synonymous to the left-hander that opens up the Motorsport Arena Oschersleben circuit in Germany, but I can promise you they're two different circuits. And as our drivers come out of turn number 1, they'll then sweep the way through turn number 2 and look to get back on the power full throttle as soon as possible as they charge their way downhill towards turn number 3 via the Norwegian forestry. Coming into the long right-hander at turn number 3, it's all about trying to set up the run into the sharper apex of turn number 4 before rising through the serpentine sequence of turns 5, 6 and 7, and then breaking over the ridge and down into turn number 8. There our drivers will get back on the power through the kink of 9 and go downhill towards the hairpin at turn number 10, where it's all about being late on the brakes and trying to nail a late apex to power back up the hill through the kink of 11 and into the left-hand right-angle corner of turn number 12. From that point onwards, the circuit becomes flat all the way to the very end, with turn 13 following up immediately, and that sets up the tone into turn number 14, which is the elongated right-hander, much like turn number 2, where it's all about hitting a nice late apex and returning to full throttle immediately to go down the start-finish straight with maximum momentum to go on to the next lap. But it's definitely going to be a challenge. But as we come on to the rules, to remind you about how we go racing, in terms of setup, this is a fixed setup series where drivers are told the setup that's available to them ahead of each and every round by the NXTGEN racing officials. Driver class-wise, the driver classes were finalised as of round 3, and I can tell you there's been no driver class changes, bar one as we're to understand it, and that change is with regards to Connor Miles, who you'll see out on the circuit, who has been moved from Pro to Pro-Am, as he was doing round number 4, so by default we did assign him to the Pro class, but after review of round 4's performance, we have reassigned him to the Pro-Am class. Sprint race-wise, the race 1 grid shall be set based on the results of qualifying, and the race 2 grid shall be set based on the results of race number 1, the finishing positions either being fully reversed if there are less than 20 competitors for the round, or partially reversed if there are 20 or more competitors for the round, with the finishing positions of the top half of the grid reversed. Well, we can inform you that because there's only 8 drivers in attendance, we will see a full reversal of the grid for race number 2. Each driver shall have 1 fast repair available in each race, and the only time we should expect them to come into the pits is for repair work. Alternatively, if they picked up a drive-through penalty to enter have done so, they needed to accumulate 17 or more instant points. That's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. I know what you're all here for. We're here for the racing, and as our drivers get set and ready to go, well, we do look to Vito Pops, currently parked up there and pointed in the wrong direction, coming out of what is turn number 12, but looking from him to Connor Miles, and we can see here the Black Flag Bandits driver making his way on through there and getting himself comfortably set for another day of racing today, and well, all looking good in the number 62 car right now as he sweeps his way up the hill, and his focus will of course be on delivering to the best of his capability as he gets himself set for the races here in Norway. But as we look from him to Daniel Stimmen, the privateer, making his way up towards turn number 12 in earnest, and turn number 12 a tricky corner because it is a very tight apex after a flowing right-hand hairpin, and the idea behind it is being you want to try and carry as much speed through to set yourself up for the run in towards turns 13 and 14. But our driver's only moments away from going racing now. And almost all said, well, it will be only moments away before they do go charging in anger into the qualifying session. And as we do now get set to go racing, well, we can't see any of you there in the chat at the moment, but don't be shy. Feel free to say hi, whether you're on YouTube, Twitch, alternatively Facebook. We welcome everybody here at NXTGEN Racing. But we are going to have to step away for a brief moment and be right back, as we do need to transition into the qualifying session. And we have to do a little bit of technical machinery behind the scenes to make sure the qualifying results are not spoiled, so we'll be back in less than 30 seconds to get qualifying underway. So it's away we go, ladies and gentlemen, for qualifying, and thank you for your patience in waiting for us to come back. We just have to do that there to make sure that the timing tower does not show the final qualifying times. It is one of the limitations or potential technical issues with an iRacing replay file, where every so often the timing tower just simply displays all the qualifying times right at the end of the session, but at the start of the session instead, that takes away all the thrill and surprise in terms of who's going to get pole position, and we don't want any spoilers, of course. So as we do see Jamie Dory making his way on down towards turn at number 3 and 4 for the first time today in anger. We're heading into the braking zone here. What can we expect in qualifying? Well, given the fact we only have 8 drivers on circuit, and we do have a 50-50 split of drivers in classes with what is 4 pros and 4 primes, it means it is going to be a relatively quiet circuit. Everybody should have an opportunity to find ample space to be able to get a lap in. Now, can we expect any drivers to focus on slipstream assistance for qualifying, where they try to stay close to another car and pick up the distant tow and gain speed on the straight? Well, the short answer to that is probably not, because the only time you want to be close behind another car around here is when you're making your way onto the start-finish straight to either complete a lap or go onto a lap. But beyond that, you could argue as well, it's the run down towards turn at number 3, albeit there the downhill drop and the fact it's a very long trail braking zone means you ideally do not want dirty air on your way down towards turn number 3, and that's why there's the emphasis really on there only being one extended straight, and it is the start-finish straight, because overtaking is possible in the run from 2 to 3, but it's very difficult given the fact that it is such a long run to the apex at turn number 3, and therefore the straight's a lot shorter in reality than it looks to be on paper. But as we do see Daniel J. Lewis making his way out of the final corner and up towards turn at number 1. Meanwhile, behind him we have Daniel Stimman here heading towards the timeline as well, and Stimman getting himself set, and we look forward to seeing how the 75 driver gets on, given the fact that right now the privates here from Rossum's Universal Robots, we did see compete in the Proto GT3 Championship recently in the most recent season, and more on that later this year, of course, when it comes back at the end of June. Well, as Stimman flows his way on around right now, could he have an opportunity to potentially steal some points away from the likes of his championship rivals, including Mark Sykes, the leading prime driver, making his way on down the hill, and as he comes down in towards turn number 3, keeping it pointed in a straight line, which, not to be sarcastic, but that's a good sign there. If you're able to get the car to point in very linearly into turn number 3 and transition round towards turn number 4, and then you are starting to get good control of the car. Turns 3 and 4, perhaps the 2 most challenging corners on this circuit, given the length of that run down into turn 4 via 3. But Sykes there going a bit deep through 7 into 8, and therefore deciding to let other drivers go and opt to go on to another lap very shortly. And we are expecting plenty of qualifying laps around here. Our drivers are not going to be hard pressed for time, with the lap being well under 2 minutes, so therefore they will get in the region of somewhere between 6 to 9 laps under their own steam, depending on how much fuel they take in and whether they come into the pits for a tyre change. But as we do look to Connor Miles making his way behind, where's Daniel Stimman in the Black Bandits machine, and the number 62 driver here heading on to the brakes, and as he comes on through the right-hander, we can see that on the side of the car, the advertisement saying become a bandit, and indeed I think the team are currently recruiting. But as he heads up towards turn at number 1, well, the first time's going to be it's Daniel J. Lewis who takes the provisional pole line of a 28.513. Puts the bar quite high, but a lot of drivers yet to get a valid time on the board, or a representative time we should say, including Mark Sykes. They've been 11 seconds off the pace. But meanwhile, Chris Midmark heading to line. This will be his first lap, and what does he do? It's a 28.027, half a second faster than Lewis's. So as a result, looking good as he makes his way in towards turn number 1, and Midmark setting the bar quite high as he flows on through and goes on to his second flying lap. But as we do say hello there to Arctic 2 Gaming in the YouTube chat, also known as Connor Miles there, who's looking forward to seeing all the action. Glad to have you with us, Connor, and I hope you're doing well. But as we do see Midmark making his way on down the hill, we'll very shortly jump aboard with one of our drivers for a flying lap. Already we can see that Daniel J. Lewis started to strike back with trying to set up a fastest lap of his own. going purple in subsector 1, purple in subsector 2, and this will naturally happen as fuel comes out the cars, with there being quite a number of acceleration zones. The less fuel you have, the more lap time you're going to gain by default, because you're moving less mass around, and these cars are extremely light. With a driver in them, they are typically, assuming that the average driver's weight is 70 kilograms, they are less than 500 kilograms in terms of their total mass, and that does mean that these cars are very light, very nimble, and heavily effective with how much fuel you have in the fuel tank. And as we do see Lewis heading towards the timeline, well, Dory goes fastest of everybody, so then it's going to be Daniel J. Lewis who jumps up there on a 27.509, so he's really setting the time tower alive right now, with their Callum Jenkins P4 ahead of Connor Miles, and it's Daniel Stimmen ahead of Mark Sykes. Vito Pops yet to get a time on the board, and Pops, I think, is struggling right now as he makes his way into turn number 12. And I did hear down in the paddock in the build-up to today, he was having some difficulty with his equipment. I do believe that he's recently had some changes to the technology he's using to go sim racing, and with that, maybe just catching him out to a degree. So I think he is trying to embed things back in as he makes his way out of the final corner and up towards the start-finish line. But this will be his first flying lap that he goes on to, and as he gets himself set, meanwhile Daniel Stimmen coming to the end of another lap, and we're going to very shortly be jumping on board with him for a flying lap of the circuit. Well, as we get the onboard and dashboard in the bottom right corner of your screen, if you want to keep track of his speed and gear, and heading in towards turn number 1, braking there 75 metres before quarter apex, and flying through the left into right turn 2, takes a nice early apex here, keeps it tight and empowers out, lets the car coming out the corner, uses all the road width on exit, returns to full throttle, and now it's the downhill run, and you can see there, blind crest, even blinder crest now as he descends rapidly down the gradient in towards turn number 3, and braking at the 50 metre board, trail braking in 4th gear, waited to drop to 3rd, does it between the corners, down to 2nd as he approaches the apex in turn number 4, and now flying up, he'll bring the car into the right for turn number 5, goes a little bit deeper, the understeer creeps in, and that compromises his line into 6, he sacrifices further speed as he straight lines up towards 7, and now down into turn number 8, drops to 1st gear, gets a nice tight apex, he flows on out, and now the car spat out up towards turn number 9, and downhill in towards 10. Brief breather before he goes onto the brakes, and braking here at the 50 metre board. It's a long run in towards the hairpin, down to 1st gear and back on the throttle on exit as he makes his way uphill through the kink of 11 and onwards towards 12. Straight lines to the outside on the entry of 12 here, using plenty of entry curve and touches the apex curve as well. Keeps 2 wheels in the white lines just about, so it's still a valid lap as he comes through 13 and onto the brakes of 14. Now staying in 2nd gear initially, he'll gradually bring the nose in, having to really fight with the steering wheel there, and I think just not quite getting the smoothness of braking as he makes his way out the corner. Track limits there being defined by the exit curve, but as he makes his way across the timeline, what's it going to be for Daniel Stimmen? Well, he does drift out across the line and not too pleased, I think, with that lap, and he's going to have to go again, only a 29.677, but definitely right now, the slightest driver out there by a 1 second margin, and Stimmen's still trying to push on here to fight a bit more pace. But as we move in towards the second half of this qualifying session shortly, Vito Bob's currently the last of the pros, but he's P4 overall. And interested to see how we do have currently the split of the field precisely with the pros leading ahead of the pro-ams. Normally we do see a little bit of intermingling between the classes, where the fastest pro-ams will be ahead of some of the slower pros, but it looks though today the pro-ams all in their own space at the back of the field, with Daniel J. Lewis there setting the new fastest lap of this qualifying session at 27.184, currently 900ths faster Chris Midmark when it's coming down to hundreds, so that time can be made a loss of a single corner, let alone the whole lap. And as they make their way into the second half now, it's for Midmark to try and respond as he heads across the timeline. He improves there by 400ths, about 300ths we should correct ourselves, to a 27.243, and as he heads into turns 1 and 2 once again, we're coming through the right-hander, and Midmark trying to set up an even better lap as he exits turn number 2, using all the road width there and really flying right now. And that's the thing with these cars, if it looks smooth, then it is a very fast lap that's brewing. Indeed, if you've ever watched Formula 1 and watched drivers such as Jenson Button, the laps may not look the fastest because they're not overly aggressive, but they're very smooth laps, and those naturally start to come on through to be the fastest laps of the session. And that's no exception with the Ray engineered FF1600 machine, which can be entered as the Formula Ford Series counterpart. But as he comes up the hill and in towards turn number 7, he descends, dropping it through into 8, and for Midmark, well, currently improving in what is his first sector. What about his second sector? In fact, he's not improved in his first sector, let's correct that, but as he comes down the hill towards the end of subsector 2, does not improve either. So this lap is not a notable improvement, but meanwhile, one driver who is improving, albeit of a compromised line there into turn number 13. I think Jenkins decided to sacrifice his lap to go for another one. It is Callum Jenkins rolling out now for Team Hard as he heads towards the timeline. And currently P6, can he find a way to close up the 4 attempts to Miles, who's just in front of him there as the Black Flag Bandits driver goes across the line. And Jenkins in the end does not find improvement that time around, but he's still got time to try and put a little bit more pressure on his prime rival. But meanwhile, Mark Sykes, what is there, 1.8 attempts off of Jenkins, so it definitely looks like Jenkins has the upper hand right now. But let's not count out the fact that Stimmen could get back into the mix, given he's only at 4 attempts off, as Stimmen does seem to be finding his feet right now as Sykes heads across the line this time. It's a warm-up lap to go on to a new one, but as he heads in towards turn number 1, well, Jamie Dory, currently purple in subsector 1, making his way up the hill through turns 6, 7 and in towards 8. He descends now. He's got the car in front of him there. I do believe that may be Daniel Lewis. He's getting a distant toe off him. They do feel the toe up to about 1.5 seconds in these cars, so he's getting a brief sniff of it as he makes his way down in towards the hairpin, and that will bolster him a little bit on the straight, so not costing too much front end rotation into the corners, so he's going to gain a lot for a little bit of understeer being invoked. As he comes down in towards turn at number 12, it's corners like 12 with that understeer does just start to pang a little bit. You can see that almost going a bit too wide coming out of 12, but now's the run through 13 into 14. It's all about going overly deep into 14 and then connecting the car back to the apex curve and using that curve to help rotate the car around as they make their way on towards the timeline. And when Dory comes to the timeline, we jump aboard with him to go for another lap. Fastest lap of the race for Dory, fastest lap of qualifier, I should say, at 27.164. Now he goes on to another and trying to push on down to second gear and into turn number 2. He immediately goes here, really aggressive now. I think Dory feeling as though after that lap he can raise the bar even higher as Midmark goes pole now by only 2 thousandths of the 27.162. So Dory's got to respond here with 4 minutes to go as he comes on down the hill in towards turn number 3. And the later you brake here, the riskier it is, but the higher the potential reward as he goes a bit deep there into 4 and he brings the car towards the apex. But notice how by doing that late turning, he loses out on the run through 4 up towards 5. Now carries the momentum into 6 and 7, so he's got to try and recover at least a 10th here as he makes his way around into the second half of the lap through turn number 8 and constantly having to siphon the steering wheel there as he turned for 8. Again, the nose just not wanting to bite into the corner as he breaks his way into the turn 10 hairpin. Now going all the way down to first gear, taking a little bit of grass there, and this has been a scrappy lap from Dory. Not the way he's wanted it to go. He's improved in subsector 2, but he's not improved in subsector 1 as he comes towards the end of subsector 3 on the exit at 12. He'll hit the time in line, and he's not improved there, so he is going to improve further. It's all going to come into the final corner. Daniel J. Lewis just in front and setting the best of the race, I should say. We're not at the race yet, we're in qualifying, but as they make their way across the timeline, Daniel J. Lewis currently going purple in subsector 3, and well, it's going to be a fastest lap for what is there, Lewis. It's pole 26.937 provisional, but we do wait to see if anybody else can respond as Dory does improve, but he's now finding himself at 8.5 hundredths off of Lewis's pole time. And meanwhile, looking from them back to Connor Miles, he's just got prime pole on what is there, a 27.66 to the nearest hundredth. So Miles continues to deliver. Midmark into P3 and only 1.5 tenths off of Lewis's time, but it does look as though Daniel J. Lewis may have this all hooked up, and time is ticking away as our drivers continue to push around with 2.5 minutes left on the clock. But Daniel Stimmen in the pit lane at the moment. I think they're doing some work to the car. Perhaps they've decided enough's enough in qualifying, and they're not going to find any more time. They'll wait to go racing. But meanwhile, one driver who does need to find a bit more time versus Callum Jenkins, it's Mark Sykes, as the next-gen racing driver in the 666 machine comes out of turn number 2 and down towards 3 he charges. But as he comes on down the hill, the problem for Sykes is he's got to try and find 2 temps, and well, it's quite easily found that time, but given the fact that Jenkins has always had the advantage, Jenkins does slightly improve to a 28.257, so putting the margin up to 2 temps and 2 hundredths now. Well, Jenkins does seem to be in control of the battle between the 2 prime drivers in terms of this qualified position. But as Sykes heads up the hill, meanwhile, we do look from him to what is there, Jamie Dory coming to the end of another lap as Lewis has tucked in behind him. Dory using all the road width on exit there, and I believe that is permitted as he heads towards the line. Not an improvement, but meanwhile, the big name at the moment on the scores, it is Daniel J. Lewis, the pro driver, making his way in towards turn number 1 this time. And as he comes through it left into right, squeaking on the brakes there. Well, now 1.5 minutes, if that left. And And as he exits the corner, goes just to the white line. He keeps it in track limits by inches there, or in fact millimetres. Meanwhile, Chris Midmark improves, but it's not enough to move up from P3, but he's now within 1/100th of Jamie Dory's P2 times. The Midmark and Dory are battling hard to be on that front row, but it's Daniel J. Lewis who does seem to be the one who's on course for pole position here. As we hear that Connor Miles is into the pit lane, so he's had enough and he's decided there's no more pace out there. But to be fair with Miles, given the fact that he is currently at 6/10 faster compared to Callum Jenkins, I think he'll feel as though he's very safe with regards to that P5 on the grid and the Pro Am pole position. And we've also got Mark Sykes and Stimmins. We've only got 5 drivers out there at the moment, including Callum Jenkins, who will get one more lap after the one he's about to finish, but he's not looking positive at the moment with regards to his relative sector times. We briefly lose Jenkins and he rematerialises from the ether, and as he does, it's a 36.708, not enough. He's going to have to find a lot more as he goes on to one last lap. Meanwhile, Jamie Dory coming out the final corner. He should just get to the line in time and to go on to another. In fact, he won't. The time is going to strike 15 minutes as he crosses their checker flag out, but Dory does not improve. What about Lewis behind? Well, no, he does not either, but he's current pole sitter, so he won't mind that too much. Chris Midmark, meanwhile, coming to the timeline, and what can Midmark do? He's improved in the first half of the lap, but the second half of the lap is not going his way, but it is pole position for Chris Midmark. It's a 26.830. He's left it all to the last lap in his session, and he's got it done by looks of things. And now, will there be a response from Jamie Dory or Vitor Pops, the only pro drivers out there who I believe are on laps, although it's questionable if Dory is, because he crossed the line literally at 15 minutes, so we'll have to wait to see whether he's permitted to carry on. But meanwhile, Vitor Pops, the Brazilian, making his way into his turn at number 12, and as he comes his way through it, left-hand and up towards 13 and 14, well, right now not improving on what's the first half of the lap, and subsector 3 is not going his way either. So Pops currently, what is there, 3.5 tenths, almost 4 tenths off of Dory's P3 time. I think he may be the slower pro driver here in the class today, but to be fair, qualifying is only one part of the day, and the racing could prove to be otherwise. But he crossed the line, he does not improve, he stays P4. Callum Jenkins here comes to the line. Can he find a way to improve? He does improve to a 28.121, but it's not enough to get him close enough to take away Connor Miles, taking that pro and pole position. But then we also have Jamie Dory out there, and Dory just rolling round, so he did not get onto another lap. So it's qualified complete, ladies and gentlemen, and it is Chris Midmark who takes pole position overall and in the pro class, and it'll be Connor Miles, P5 on the overall grid, but taking prime pole there by a staggering, what was 4 tenths a second. In fact, 5 tenths a second. We should correct ourselves as we do the maths in our head. Miles having an absolutely brilliant qualifying session for the Black Flag Bandits, and now we get ready to go racing. As our drivers now get set and head back to the pit lane, where it's a wonderful day here in Norway, and no doubt about it, and the weather in the prime condition for us to go racing. But we are only approximately 30 to 40 seconds away from our drivers going onto the grid, and as they do so, well, the question will be who's going to be able to keep the calm and carry on in the races, given 15 minutes around here is a test by any means. Well, as our drivers make their way to the grid, this is how they line up for the first race of the day. It is Chris Midmark who takes pole position for the short sprint of round 5 of the NXTGEN Racing Formula Fix FF1600 series on iRacing, and the Swede is joined by Daniel J. Lewis who starts P2. And then it will be Jamie Dory who starts P3 for NXTGEN Racing on the second row of the grid, joined by Vitor Pops P4 there, the privateer, and then behind the front 2 rows of pros, we've got 2 rows of primes, starting with Connor Miles who takes pole position in class for Black Flag Bandits P5, joined by Team Hard's Callum Jenkins at P6, and then it's Mark Sykes for NXTGEN Racing who starts off the full row P7, and Daniel Stillman who lines up last but not least in P8 there on the grid. And we didn't quite have the pace in qualifying, but you can imagine if he's able to keep the consistency together in the race, he may still be able to build up some positions. As all our drivers gradually make their way onto the grid, we already have 5 drivers there. We're still waiting on 2 others, but all getting set at the moment. And of course, for our drivers now, it's a different complexion in the entirety. In qualifying, you only need to get 1 lap right in order to be up the front of the field. In the race, you've got to get every lap right. And this circuit is no exception as we await the lights. And It's lights out and away we go for our first race of the day as Chris Midmark looks to get a good start and charging down towards turn number 1. He gets the better launch compared to Daniel J. Lewis. Lewis by comparison with Dory on his inside here as they make their way through the opening corner. Dory's cut off there as they come through 1 into 2, but Lewis takes a compromise line into turn number 2. Therefore we see Vita Potts trying to capitalise on the gains here as they make their way through, and Vita Potts takes 1. Can he make it 2? As they make their way down towards turn number 3. Well, I don't think so. Now as they all start to build up speed, and Dory's got the toe of where's there Daniel J. Lewis as they make their way down into the right hand, and Pops loses the rear of the car immediately and goes sideways across the circuit into the runoff area. But thankfully nobody collected, as meanwhile we've also got Connor Miles taking a trip to the marbles. He brings it back on circuit, and that's cold tyres and cold brakes at turn number 3 at the start of the race. And turn 3, always a nasty corner when you've not got the car up to temperature. But it's been an eventful opening couple of corners. Drivers now start to settle on down. And we've got Connor Miles losing out from what's the lead of the Pro-Am class, and he'll be trying to battle his way back through past Daniel Stimmon and Mark Sykes. Callum Jenkins holds the Pro-Am lead here in P4 as he makes his way through turn number 10 for the first time, asking everybody there using the maximum runoff area allowed through turn number 10 in order to try and gain some pace. But I think some drivers here will need to be careful pushing too wide because of the track limits, but also on top of that, the fact they run too wide, they may find themselves coming into the grass or the gravel. And Jamie Dory almost making a trip to the gravel there on the exit of 12. But as they make the way out of the final corner, where it's Midmark who leads come the end of lap number 1 as he heads down towards the timing line, and will leading up by only what is there half a second, if that. It's Daniel J. Lewis in P2, Jamie Dory P3, followed by Callum Jenkins P4, your prime leader. Mark Sykes in P5, further behind, and then it's Daniel Stillman P6, followed by Connor Miles P7 and Vita Potts P8. Miles there battling with Potts as they come through turn number 1, and Potts loses the rear again, and Miles into the side there. And well, I could understand from Connor Miles' perspective, he'd argue there's nowhere he could go. Meanwhile, Mark Sykes getting it wrong at turn number 1 as well. All 3 drivers there, 1 Pro, 2 Primes, all getting it all out of sorts at turns 1 and 2. And we're shaking up the field once again before they've even made it to turn number 3. But meanwhile, we look from them down towards the leaders here, or up towards the leaders, I should say, as they ride their way up the hill. And as they do, it's Midmark versus Lewis right now as they come through the left-hander turn at number 7. And we look back from the rear of the Swedes car of Midmark. Now coming out of turn number 8 through the kink of 9. The problem that Chris Midmark has got here is the fact that he's going to have to push harder and harder early on. The problem we're having to push so early on, he's not quite in the phase where the tyres will feel comfortable. It's normally the 3rd racing lap where the car starts to feel at its optimum, so he's almost there, but having to put a bit of excess pressure through the tyre can just cause it to become overheated in these early stages, and you can lose a little bit of additional grip before you've really got the tyre in the optimum zone. So therefore for Midmark, he wants to try and control this race a little bit and not let the pressure from Lewis and Dory behind get to him too much. If anything, he can try and force Lewis backwards towards Dory, and he'll give him some breathing room, and he's done exactly that through 13 and 14. And as they head down towards turn number 1 this time around, fastest man of the race so far, Jamie Dory there on the 27.5 at 2.0, and with the NXTGEN Racing drive staying close, they flow left into right. Meanwhile, Daniel J. Lewis there defending hard. Dory looks at the cut back off of the apex of 2, and well, it's going to come to Dory naturally there, as J. Lewis going quite slowly out the corner, but he'll have the toe in the run down towards 3. Dory goes defensive here, but it does look as though it's going to be Lewis who gets ahead, and Dory effectively letting the place go. 9, he's not going to be able to defend it as they roll the way out of 3 into 4. Both drivers are using the full road whip, and Callum Jenkins following them up the hill as the leader of the Pro-Am class here looks unassailable right now, and Daniel Stimmon almost waits there 3.5 seconds behind, holding on to Pro-Am P2, and a very comfortable P5 overall as the Czech Republic driver does everything right so far just to simply keep the car on the black stuff and not make any mistakes. And as we said earlier, that may be coming to him given the fact he wasn't the fastest driver in qualifying, but speed does not mean everything when you go racing, even if it is just for 15 minutes, as the number 75 car continues on its way through the turn 10 hairpin. But looking from there back to Vita Potts, chasing after Connor Miles and trying to come back at his rivals. They head up the hill, and I think we're going to see a few more sparks between these guys before the race is all said and done. As meanwhile, we're hearing that Jamie Dory's headed off at turn number 12, and he's lost out to a degree. In fact, he's shot down to P5, as there is Dory. I believe it's a spin on the exit 12, taking a bit of gravel for his misdemeanor, and as he's made his way out to the final corner, now he'll chase after Stimmon to try and get P4 overall back. But on his mind, the key thing will be to try and catch up to what will be Daniel J. Lewis and Midmark, the 2 leaders of this race, albeit Midmark now started to open a gap to Lewis of which 1.6 seconds, almost 1.7 seconds they make the way out of turn number 2. But as they head down towards turn number 3, Dory right now trying to build all the speed he can to go for a move here. As meanwhile, in front of them, Callum Jenkins has had an error, and there's a wheel off of Callum Jenkins' car. Jenkins has gone to the wall. In fact, he's lost the nose cone of the car. Meanwhile, in front, Jamie Dory out the inside of Daniel Stimmen into turn 3, and he retakes P3 overall there, and with it reaffirms what is a pro overall podium as they make their way out of turn 5 and 6 and head towards 7. Now charging all the way through the left-handers of 7 and 8. Well, with Callum Jenkins having that nasty knock, I believe he took to the grass on the exit of turn number 2, and the car's kicked around and gone into the inside wall down the stretch from 2 to 3, and that can happen when you go right at 2. The car gets completely unsettled when bump step in, the grass verges, it just kicks the rear of the car around, so Jenkins will be trying to get the car to the pits for repair work if he can, to avoid the potential need to tow the car back to the pits, which costs you extra time and causes you to lose a lap in the race. Well, Vito Pops meanwhile still trying to find his way past Connor Miles as they make the way out of turn 12 and in towards 13 and 14. Now what can Pops do here to try and get a move? Well, he's got to try and get into Miles' head. The idea being here, the race still comes down to switchback style racing and overtake. Because this is the only time we could potentially see an overtake on the straights in the run down towards where it's turn number 1, and also the run up towards turn 3, albeit the run is shorter there, but Pops not close enough to look for the move under braking. And as they clear the turn 1 apex, well, you can see that Pops getting closer and closer under brake. It definitely feels like he's got a bit more speed. And as they come out to 2 and down the hill they go now. He's been at 3.5 tenths, but that's not close enough to try and attempt to move as he continues to build the pace, heading down into the double right-hander. But it's Miles who holds onto the position, and all he needs to do is take the natural racing line and not make any mistakes. Let Pops be the one to overextend as they glide the way through 4. Pops gets a better run there, using plenty of the apex curve, also a bit of grass for good measure as they come through 5 and 6 over the apex curves and in towards 7. And now Pops the closest he can potentially be without now starting to be crowded in by the rear of Miles. It's kind of having to back off there coming out of turn 8, getting way too close on power. But that goes to show you the pace that Pops does have at his fingertips. And whilst Miles is keeping it very consistent, I think we are battling against the current here. In the case of Miles, where will be Pops will eventually find a way on through, but you never know, Miles may yet have a few defensive tricks up his sleeve as they head through turn number 12. We're coming out to left-hander and towards the end of the lap now as they head into 13 and 14. Again, can Pops find a way to get nice and close here through the corner? He does try to, but this is where Miles is stronger by comparison. He does seem to have the exit of turn 14 absolutely hooked up to a T, and it's interesting to see the styles of driving. It would appear that on the opening sequence of 2 corners and the final 2 corners, which are very similar, that's Miles' territory, where he does feel a lot more comfortable with the ability to return to full throttle. Meanwhile, Vito Pops, by comparison, enjoys the middle portion lap. He seems to negotiate the winding corners much more aggressively and gains the lap time. But as they make their way down the hill and towards turn number 3, Callum Jenkins in the pit lane, currently having the repair work done to the car, and what I do believe he's had to be towed to his pit box in with the damage picked up, and that it's very unfortunate, albeit the fast repair work has now gone in. But we continue to watch this battle between Pops and Miles. They make the way up the hill, and Miles again really under a huge assailment of pressure as they come through 7 and 8. Pops this time looks to the inside. Miles goes slightly deep, and the Black Flag Bandits driver side by side on corner exit, but he's going to be running against the current as they come through 9. Contact between the two of them as Pops tries to come across, and well, both of them there, I think, feeling as though they were entitled to the space. Pops will argue that he had the space and he was able to run through. Miles, I think, would be arguing, where else am I meant to go? Well, that's going to be a tricky one there, and they may need to settle that one after the race with the stewards. But meanwhile, it'll be Vito Pops who's lost out as a result of that. He drops to P6, but he's still got an opportunity to come back. But the gap now being 3.5 seconds as time continues to trickle on. And meanwhile, looking from them to the front of the field, well, Chris Midmark, not the fastest driver out there at the moment. Last lap of 27.06. Fastest lap of the race, meanwhile, going to the driver behind him on that last lap, Daniel J. Lewis at 26.97. But the key point is that Midmark has got a 2-second advantage, and he is showing no signs of giving it up as they head down towards turn number 3, and what for them is lap number 7. And Daniel J. Lewis is showing flashes of faster pace, but he needs a little bit more of an edge here if he's going to be able to try and take the lead back before the end of time. But as they head up the hill, meanwhile, Jamie Dory coming on through turn number 4 now. The NXTGEN Racing driver after that spin at turn number 12 earlier on in the race, still trying to make a recovery drive, albeit his pace not quite on equilibrium with Midmark or Lewis. In fact, over the last couple of laps, he has been on average 2/10 a lap slower, but the top 3 lapping in the 27s and the 26s, whereas everybody else lapping in the late 27s, alternatively the 28s, and therefore it goes to show you our top 3 right now in a bit of a separate world in terms of their relative race pace. That's the comfort they have with the car, and that's why Midmark, Lewis and Dory are all in the pro class. And as they head in towards turn number 12, or particularly Dory here, meanwhile Pops versus Vars, we can't quite see it, it's obscured by the road surface, but there they are. And Vito Pops has found his way on through, and I do believe the move being made into the turn 10 hairpin, and I do wonder there if perhaps Miles has let it go, focusing on his race in class now rather than battling with Vito Pops from the other class. But as they come out to turn number 14 and onwards towards turn number 1 they go once again. Meanwhile, we look from them to your prime leader, and this is Daniel Stimon, and I think right now there's going to be a slight grin starting to appear on his face, albeit he won't take anything for granted, and that grin is the fact he started right at the back of the field. He's found his way into the lead of the prime class of P4 as well, and he's just very merrily making his way on around in the mid-28s in terms of pace, and well, whilst everybody behind him arguably does have a little bit more pace at their fingertips, particularly Vito Popster 28.5 won that last lap, I would imagine for Stimon it's all just simply about lapping to a consistent time and coming on home with a victory in class, and it's only 4 minutes away. But as he heads up the hill for turns at 5 and 6, meanwhile we do look from him to what is Connor Miles chasing after Pops. Well, I think the battle is back on between these two now, or at least Connor Miles is using Pops as a bit of what is their pace car in terms of using his pro rival to set a pace, and he'll try and follow as closely as possible. Can be a little bit of a motivator there when you're trying to chase down the next driver, and it is under a 6-second gap to Daniel Stimon. They have time, but they're needing to close the gap down to Stimon by on average what will be 2 seconds a lap if he wants an opportunity to try and go for the lead of the prime class come the end of this race. Now, of course, the other thing that needs to be considered is the finishing positions of this race will be fully inverted for the race 2 grid here today. So we could see some drivers potentially now focus on finishing where they are, rather than worrying about trying to make any more ground in order to be able to capitalise on the reverse grid. And Callum Jenkins, who's a lap down in P8, he won't mind the fact he'll be on pole for the next race, given the fact now he can't really make any further ground unless any other drivers are to fall a lap down from an instant, most likely, if we were to give you the theory. But when we come to the practical here, it can be a different story in the entirety, as Miles continues to follow Pops around in that run for P5. But heading from them back to the aforementioned team hard driver here, Callum Jenkins, maybe a lap down, but putting his pace back together, and I think using the remainder of this race in order to get himself keyed in. 9, he'll be from the front of the field in race number 2, and therefore he'll try and lead it for 20 minutes. Make it an overall and class win if he can. The minimum will be a prime class win, because then he'll get the upper hand versus Mark Sykes, and Mark Sykes currently in P7 or P3 in the prime class will gain some points in Jenkins, but not as many as he potentially could do so if he was in P2 or leading in the prime class here in his first race of the day. But as we see Jenkins flying on through turns 7 and 8, meanwhile we look from the back of the field to the front of the field, and it is the Swede Chris Midmark who holds on for now. For Midmark Motorsport, the gap continues to grow to 4 seconds versus Daniel J. Lewis, and you can see on your pictures just how pronounced that gap is as they head across the timeline. We look back to Lewis as he comes on through as well. 2 more laps to go here as both drivers continue to push this race to its natural conclusion, and what it does seem as though, whilst we have seen moments where Daniel J. Lewis has been the faster driver, in fact he has been the only driver to put a 26 on the board in this race session, 26.97, the fastest lap of the race. He's not matching the pace of Midmark currently. If anything, Midmark is lapping considerably faster lap after lap by a couple of attempts, and on that last lap by 1.3 seconds almost was Midmark faster. So Midmark has found a little bit of magic out there, and I think it may be again the consistency that Midmark brings to the table each race compared to the pace some of his rivals has, and that consistency is really doing him well as we see them both sharing the camera shot for a brief moment. But meanwhile, looking back to Jamie Dory heading up the hill, and the NXTGEN Racing driver and starting to close on Daniel J. Lewis, but he has got still what is a gap of 8.5 seconds that he needs to try and bring crashing down as quickly as possible. But I think he's running out of time as he makes his way up towards turn number 10. But for Dory, as he runs very wide, he's got to be careful, and I think just had a bit of moment, a bit of a lapse of concentration at the wheel through turn number 9. He only went to the outside grass there. The NXTGEN Racing driver now getting it back together, and as he makes his way into his turn number 12, with the road surface being wide at the King K9, but not that wide for him to be able to straight line that wide off. But as they head in towards 13 and 14, and we do look to Chris Midmark, who comes to the timeline. One more lap to go for the number 86 driver, and this will be a race victory that will essentially put him on parity versus Chris Knox in the championship. And then, if he can make it 2 wins out of 2, he'll give himself the best possible advantage going into the season finale at Oran Park in a week's time. But meanwhile, looking back to Daniel J. Lewis, we can see here the 88 driver continues to push on, brings the gap down to Midmark slightly there, brings it down by 3 tenths on that previous lap, almost 4 tenths in fact. But the thing is, with Midmark having 4 seconds to play with, well, it's not going to be too big of a concern. If he loses a whole second a lap, he'll still be leading comfortably by the time they get to that checker flag. And fuel's not a concern because they all will be running the same fuel tank, and therefore our drivers right now pushing on as much as they can. And you can understand from Lewis's perspective, he's got to try and push as hard as he can in order to close up. In fact, he's bringing the gap down very quickly. He's now halved the gap to just under 2 seconds, and I wonder whether Midmark is completely backing out or whether there's a potential problem for the Swede as they make their way down towards turn number 10, because that gap is continuing to surge down unless Midmark has completely turned the wick down and therefore knows exactly how much time he can sacrifice from corner to corner, which wouldn't surprise me. To be fair, Midmark's very tactical in his approach to each and every race, and then imagine the gap at 1.5 seconds. It comes down further as they make their way through 13 and 14, but I don't think Midmark is going to mind. Whereas he makes his way out the final corner, it's been a calm and controlled race from pole position, and Chris Midmark sees the checker flag. He comes to line, and it's Midmark Motorsports' Chris Midmark who takes the win in race 1 of the day, overall in the pro class, ahead of Daniel J. Lewis P2, and the privateer there chasing down Midmark, but didn't have enough time to get the job done. Jamie Dory P3 there for NXTGEN Racing, completing the overall and pro podium in what was a difficult race, but a resurgence. And then Daniel Stimmen takes the prime win, having started from the back of the field, just calm, collected and consistent, and the number 75 driver absolutely nailing it with Vita Potts P5 there. The Brazilian having a difficult race but bouncing back from adversity, and then Connor Miles of Black Flag Bandits will be runner-up in the prime class, P6 overall, ahead of Mark Sykes, who will come through to take P7 for NXTGEN Racing and complete with the prime podium. And then it will be Callum Jenkins immediately behind him, but a lap down behind him, P8 there, and Sykes gains a small amount of ground versus his championship rival in their battle for the prime crown. But those are the finishing positions for our drivers, ladies and gentlemen. What a fantastic way to start off proceedings at Rudskogen. We saw plenty of batting at the start of the race, and it all came down to drivers trying to keep their cool and keep it on the circuit as best they possibly can. But Chris Midmark really in control as he makes his way on around in the cool down lap here and towards the pit lane with Daniel J. Lewis behind him. Well, I think Lewis there will be staying as close behind him as if to say to him, if only I had a couple more laps, I would have been very close to you. And I think Midmark will be thinking, you can think of that, but at the same time, I had full control of this race. And as they both make their way into the pit lane, well, what a great start to the day for Midmark. And Lewis as well gained some key points in his championship hopes, but as they come on down pit row, meanwhile we do look back to Connor Miles here, and well, that the difficulty with that contact between himself and Vita Pops costing him, but still taking a P2 as we do run out of proverbial VHS tape there with the replay file coming to a stop, but it doesn't stop us from bringing you the race results subject to any steward's inquiries. And as we can see, after a grand total of 15 minutes of racing, our first race of the day, Chris Midmark taking the win there by 1.5 seconds for Midmark Motorsport over the privateer of Daniel J. Lewis. Jamie Dory completing a top 3, and with that both the overall and pro podium for NXTGEN Racing, and what was in the end a further 11 seconds off of the top 2, with Daniel Stimmen at P4. They're missing out on an overall podium, but I don't think he'll mind that when the privateer has taken the prime win, and by quite the staggering margin. A great drive from Stimmen, and definitely showing that consistency outweighs outright pace. Circuits such as Rudskogen Motorsenter, with Vita Pops completing the top 5 there, and the privateer having a difficult start to proceedings. Connor Miles, P6 for Black Flag Bandits, runner-up in the prime class, ahead of Mark Sykes for NXTGEN Racing, who completed the prime podium, and then Callum Jenkins from Team Hard finishing a lap down after that instant coming out of turn number 2, saw him make contact with the wall, but still keeping his head in it, and he'll be starting on pole for our second race of the day. But that was race number 1, ladies and gentlemen, and coming up shortly will be the build-up to race number 2. We'll be back in approximately what will be 5 minutes' time for the build-up to the grid for race 2. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss it. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we return for the build-up to race 2 of 2 today here at the Norwegian circuit of Rudskogen Motorsenter, located near the town of Rakkestad. Race number 1 saw Chris Midmark take the overall and pro win, and Daniel Stimmen take P4, and with that the prime win. Well, the question is, can the pair make it back-to-back victories in the upcoming long sprint of 20 minutes in duration? Well, it is going to be a challenge for the pair of them, given the reverse grid, the full reverse grid that's going to be coming their way. But as our drivers get set in the final warm-up session, we do apologise for being slightly behind schedule, but we should be getting ready to go racing with the kickoff time for race number 2, expected to be somewhere around what is at 6 o'clock this evening, so in under 3 minutes time. And as we do look to Callum Jenkins making his way on around currently, will the team hard driver will know the pressure is on from the front row of the grid, as he'll be starting pole position, having finished in P8 and last to our field come the end of race number 1. And well, what can we read into from our first race of the day? I think the key things we need to read into is consistency is king. And we did see Chris Midmark absolutely deliver with consistency on lap time. And even though we did see the likes of Daniel J. Lewis and Jamie Dory have faster laps under their hats and putting in the faster laps of the race, well, little mistakes crept in and little off tracks also saw them either lose time naturally or have to give time back with automated slowdown penalties. And that was the key thing that perhaps kept them behind. And we also saw a similar situation with regards to the chase by Connor Miles after Vito Pops, after their initial coming together, and then a close battle between them for what was P5 come the very end. And I do see their RT2 gaming or Connor Miles clarifying that it was slowdowns that were afforded to him, which ended up causing him not to be able to close down Pops at the end of the race. So with those 20 minutes upcoming, it's going to be a bigger test of consistency and who can avoid getting it wrong lap after lap, with even the smallest mistakes costing a driver dearly. But we are only a couple of minutes away from finding out. And well, in the championship battle between what is our pro driver Mark Sykes and Callum Jenkins, for Jenkins, he needs to have a result ahead of Mark Sykes if he wants to come back and put it on a level playing field going into the finale in a week's time at Oran Park. As our drivers get ready and set, we do look from what is Connor Miles to Daniel J. Lewis, and we'll have spent most of the race chasing after what was Chris Midmark in race number 1 and getting tantalisingly close towards the end, but Midmark always seeming to be in control. He'll find himself starting on the 4th row with Midmark, but in P7, and can he find a way to get the launch off the line and stay ahead of Midmark in the run to turn number 1? More odd numbers will be starting on that inside run, and that may just be the trick that's needed for turns 1 and 2 in order to hold firm. But again, for what is Lewis, he is dealing with one of the most smoothest starters in the form of Midmark. But also keep your eyes out for Jamie Dory, who after losing their turn number 12 in race number 1, has shown he's got a lot of pace under his fingertips. And if he can keep his calm in race number 2, he may just be able to come away with the win. I suspect it's going to be very close between the trio in the pro class, and they'll all be trying to take that win home. There's no doubt about it. And Vito Pops will start a bit further up the road, and you never know what the Brazilian privateer will be able to deliver, starting from what will be affecting the second row of the grid. As Dory then carried a bit too much speed into turn number 7 and the rear of the car kicking on around. I think he'll be getting himself set to come into the pit shortly, as we do look to Daniel Stewart, the Rossum's Universal Robots driver, bringing on home the win in the first race of the day in the Prime class. And whilst he's not had the pace of his peers, as we said, it's not mattered too much, because he's had the consistency in order to outweigh the pace of his peers, and their mistakes have cost him dear as he comes across the timeline. I believe we are only a minute off now from the transition to the grid, and we don't read too much into that time. At the top centre of your screen there, that is an erroneous practice timer. I believe it should almost be at 10 minutes right now, as we see Jenkins there and Stimmons sharing a bit of tarmac side by side, and will Jenkins just give a polite elbow out there to Stimmons to say, we're going racing shortly, I hope you're ready for it. And I think Stimmons more than ready as the checker flag comes out of this warm-up session. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for our drivers to make their way to the grid for race number 2. And as our drivers make the way onto the grid, whilst we can't walk you down the grid due to limitations of the replay file, we can gradually see the grid being populated by our drivers here. And well, indeed, Mark Sykes there and Callum Jenkins will share the front row of the grid. Callum Jenkins taking pole position with Sykes alongside him. And as we look from the blimp camera, it will then be from them the parent of Connor Miles and what will be a Vito Pop starting on your second row. We then have behind them the pairing of what is Daniel Stimmen and Jamie Dory on your third row. And then it will, last but not least, be the parent of Daniel J. Lewis and Chris Midmark. But the grid is set, ladies and gentlemen. We await the lights. and it's lights out and away we go for our second race of the day as Callum Jenkins looks to get a good start off the line, and he does so. Mark Sykes meanwhile stalled a little bit by comparison as they head into the opening corner, side by side there between Pops and Sykes. They make their way through turn 1, and Pops will get ahead initially. Now Sykes will try and come back in, but I think that Sykes will just simply tuck in rather than try and make a move coming out of 2. Now parrying their way down towards turn number 3 for the first time. We saw this corner caught out many with cold brakes and cold tyres on the overlap of race 1. Will we see more of that in race number 2? Well, Dory's going to go on the inside. This is very bold from Dory, and meanwhile the inside for the lead goes Vito Pops as he takes the lead in this race, keeps it together but can't quite keep the car through turn number 4, and Pops goes sideways towards the gravel on the runoff area. But meanwhile Jenkins goes overly deep. That's going to cause the whole field to Constantina on through as they make their way through 5 into 6, and Miles there being elbowed out sideways, so they come through 5 through 6, and on the inside of it is Daniel J. Lewis as they come on down there, and Miles going all the way around the outside as Lewis, I think, slide out of corner apex, not feeling as though the grip's there in the car, and as they head down towards turn number 10, well, Miles under pressure, Lewis looking for the inside run into the hairpin. Miles gives him all the space, and as Lewis carves up the inside, Miles ducks back in immediately here and tries to look for the run around the outside 9 in towards 10. Can't quite find it, but meanwhile from there we've got Jenkins versus Stimmer behind as they make their way in towards turn number 12, and as they flow the way on through, we've got a car pointing the wrong way. That's Sykes who's gone round at 12. Well, whether that was aided or not, we're not quite sure. What we can see is that Mark Sykes has dropped to the back of the field, but meanwhile as we look from the back of the field towards the front of the field, it's Jamie Dory who leads after 1 lap. Behind Dory, it's Chris Midmark P2, Daniel J. Lewis P3, Connor Miles P4, followed up by Daniel Stimmer P5, Callum Jenkins P6, Peter Box P7, and it'll be Mark Sykes to come into the pit lane due to damage picked up as a result of that spin, potentially damage to the suspension, alternative flat spot in the tyres, but Sykes is in P8 as we have 7 runners out of the circuit, about 1 in the pit lane, and we would presume that Sykes will return in the near future after a quick repair. But as they make their way down towards turn 3 this time around, well, definitely the tempo has been set. There's a lot more to play for in the second race of the day, albeit 20 minutes in duration, so therefore you've got to take your time with it. And as we jump aboard here with the team hard machine of Callum Jenkins chasing after Daniel Stimmer as they make their way up the hill, and Stimmer here doing everything he can to try and hit the apex. Right, Jenkins struggling in that dirty air. You can see the car just not wanting to flow. The amount of understeer that's being brought into the car really cost him dear as he comes through turn number 8. And right now, I think for the number 19 driver, it's all about backing the car off slightly and just getting into a rhythm and changing his braking zones at his turn-in point. So Stimmer goes a bit deep there at the turn 10 hairpin. That will cost him approximately a 10th as they make their way up towards turn number 12, albeit Fat Jenkins not able to capitalise. If anything, that gap's stabilising quite early, and I think Jenkins here may really be struggling with the dirty air effect coming off the car in front. But as they head in towards turn number 14, meanwhile behind him we're hearing the Vitor Pops has had an inch. He's gone round at turn number 12. He's in P7, stays in P7 and is rejoining the circuit now, so he carries on his way. But meanwhile looking for the battle for P5, we look to the front of the field. And this is Jamie Dory versus Chris Midmark, and well, Jamie Dory now finds himself ahead of arguably the most consistent man on the circuit today. And well, as we look back from the rear of Dory's car, Midmark will look distant at the moment. I can assure you those 4.5 tenths, they can very quickly come crashing down when they're in the tar of one another on these straightaways. And as he heads down towards turn number 3, well, Dory here taking the natural race line, Midmark taking a little bit of peak on the inside, and I think Midmark having more confidence about being aggressive through 3 into 4, and it gives him the opportunity to close up. He gains a 10.5 there on the exit 4. Now coming up the hill, Midmark really enjoyed the flow of the car. Dory by comparison all out of sorts as he comes through 7, goes overly deep into 8, and Jamie Dory is struggling. I think at this point of the race, Dory's just not got the comfort in the tyre temperature, and as they come down towards turn number 10, well, it's going to be Midmark who's within 3 tenths but backs it off there into the hairpin. Dory had to really fight at the steering wheel to get the car to connect to the apex. As they made the way up towards turn number 12, Midmark can stay close, he can just put the pressure on. He's got a whole race to play with here. Dory goes deep, going through 12, and Midmark's going to look for the move as they make the way to 13. Outside he will go all the way through 14 with Midmark. Now can Dory simply keep him there? And I think the short answer is yes, he can, but at what cost to the run onto the start for this straight? Now Midmark will cut back, and he will very gradually build some speed, but Dory has the inside line along the pit wall, so he can go defence here as they head up towards turn number 1. But looking from them to Daniel Stimmer versus Callum Jenkins, this is the battle for his second place in the Pro class as they make their way through. Jenkins along the outside, gets the move done into turn 1. But meanwhile, we look back from them to the race leaders, and Dory versus Midmark, it's part 2 now, as they come out of turn number 2, and Midmark getting the better exit, albeit Dory now getting the overspeed as they come down the hill, and it is only 700s between them, but Midmark's on the inside. Dory turns in, side by side on entry to 3, they clear and head into 4, still side by side up the hill they go, showing great racing respect to room for one another. Dory keeps 2 balls in the white lines, he won't have to slow down as they come through 5 into 6. Well, now it's going to be all about who's the braver on the brakes here into 7. Dory in the inside has natural advantage, but Midmark goes deep here in order to set himself up for a cutback run. Dory holds on, but Midmark is still all over the back of him here. This is not over yet as they come down towards turn number 10. Onto the anchors they go, and Dory will have to defend and park the car on apex to make sure that Midmark cannot capitalise. And as they come up the rise and in towards turn number 12, well, Midmark has got Dory's number, and now he's just trying to call it. As they make the way through 12, we ride aboard here with the Swede of the 86, giving the pursuit. And as they come through turn 13 into 14, well, into the braking zone they go, and Dory here drifting through the corner as he goes into 14 on exit. However, it's going to be 2.5 temps, but Midmark getting the power down a little bit earlier there, drifts a bit wide, but can now use the overspeed from the slipstream that's given to him in order to try and reset the situation as he heads onwards towards the braking zone. With fastest lap of the race from Daniel J. Lewis at 27.078, so he is closing up to this battle, gaining a whole second and a half of the leaders on the last lap. Understandable given how hard they're battling. Dory here defending to the inside of the exit 2, and the idea being that Dory is now trying to break the toe for a little bit of direction change on the straight down towards 3. What does it accomplish? In reality, not too much, but it may just save a 100th or 2 and take away some of Midmark's confidence about trying to go up the inside into 3, because we do know that Midmark really does have control over this car through turn number 3 compared to his peers, and as he makes his way through 5, Midmark here starting to build another run. Dory out of sorts, and notice it's that transition off the curve at turn 5. Dory just cannot get the car to settle down for the right-hander at 6, and that's when Midmark is gaining in this middle sector. Whereas they made the way out of 8 and 9, Midmark's going to be there looking on the inside. He'll go late on the brakes. He'll Willie though. Dory decides to go later. Midmark turns on the inside. Dory gives him the space, thinking there might be a car there, and as they make the way out to turn number 10 up towards 11, 12 they go. All right, now Dory just holding on, but it's by a sliver here, and if he's going to be able to do this in the next 13 minutes, well, that will be absolute testament to his ability. But Midmark continuing to harass him from corner to corner and lap after lap as they come out of 14 and on to what for them is lap number 6 under race conditions for the second time today. But as they head up towards the timeline this time, Dory getting the good exit out to the final corner, Midmark following him as they charge down towards the next lap, and behind you can see Daniel J. Lewis now within a second of the leaders. He is close, and he'll be looking for an opportunity to get involved and make it a three-way fight. Meanwhile, Daniel Stillman versus Callum Jenkins for P2 in the Pro-Am class, with Conor Miles currently 5 seconds up the road, and Miles in a world of his own, it would seem. But Jenkins right now has to focus more and more what's behind him rather than what's in front of him as they head on down towards turn number 3. We're hearing that Mark Sykes has had a spin at turn 1. In fact, we can see him there. He's brought the car back to bear as he now gets back up to speed. He's a lap down after the pit stop earlier on in the race. But meanwhile, looking at from our last place driver to our leading drivers here as they come up the hill and in towards turn 7 and 8, where Dory ahead of Midmark followed by Lewis, but they're separated by less than a second in totality. And as they come out of turn 8 and down towards 9, well, Lewis they're losing out to a degree in the dirty air of the 2 cars in front of him going overly deep. In fact, Lewis losing 1.5 seconds through turn number 8 there by going so deep he's had to practically stop the car. And as they make the way out to turn number 10, well, Midmark will be given the opportunity to come in as they head in towards the braking zone. But meanwhile, we look for Midmark versus what is their Dory, and Midmark looking on the inside into 12, couldn't quite get it done. And now as they come through the right hander of 14, I think the tone is shifted up a gear here, and now Midmark, I think, starting to take the gloves off and say we're not playing anymore. And as they head onto the start for the straight within 2 tenths as they cross the timeline, Midmark thinks Dory to the inside. Will he try and squeeze it a bit further? No, he won't. He'll look to the outside. Dory opens up his racing line there into turn number 1, gives himself as much space as possible. And as they come on through, Dory taking plenty of apex going through too. That may cost him some speed. Midmark, meanwhile, goes beyond the white lines. Will there be a slowdown for Midmark? We'll have to wait and see. He'll definitely be classified as an off track, but I don't think he's been classified as gaining time. But as he heads down towards turn number 3, side by side into the corner, Midmark's going all in here. Dory on the outside. They clear the clear and head in towards turn number 4. Midmark's still there. Dory turns in. It's going to be the outside to inside for Jamie Dory as he tries to get turn number 5 hooked up. Midmark's on the outside as they come through 5 into 6. Side by side up the hill they go. Dory on the inside into 7. Let's not stop between the pair of them here. And as they come down through 8, Dory again right where he needs to be. And as we look back for the rear, Jamie Dory's car. He holds onto the lead once more, and how these guys are doing is absolutely phenomenal. Great race of respect and knowledge between them, and as they make their way through turn number 10, well, there is a brief over rotation for Midmark. You can see the rear left tyre from the driver's perspective, rear right from our camera's perspective, starting to slide and smoke coming off the tyre. Midmark is having to push. Dory goes wide there, using all the road width he dares to dream to do so, but now Daniel J. Lewis back in this fight once more in P3 and staying with the top two. And his target will be not to make that error, which we saw at turn 7-8 on the previous lap, as he goes very wide there coming out the final corner. So as soon as I say that, it does feel like it's a bit of commentator's curse at the moment. And behind them by 1.5 seconds is Connor Miles, your prime leader, who very comfortably just staying there watching at the battle at the moment. He's got the proverbial popcorn seat view in P4. He's just getting to watch the spectacle in front, and he'll be hoping that potentially at the end of the race he can be pulled into it and give himself an overall podium. But as we ride aboard here with Daniel J. Lewis, meanwhile, half a second back from Midmark, and I think it's just whenever he comes into one of those medium speed sweepers, he struggles to a degree getting the power down, particularly at turn 2, and also coming on through turns 3 and 4 here. And we can see the gap and how pronounced it is, as meanwhile we look from when it's Daniel J. Lewis to Jamie Dory and Midmark together. We'll be staying with the exterior views this time as they serpentine their way up the hill. Well, Dory now holding the lead position, albeit finding himself not having to have the pressure of too wide all the way through, but Midmark backing things off for a brief moment. And I wonder whether Midmark at this point potentially feels as though he needs to calm things down for a couple of laps and then get him still set up once again, because we did see him almost lose the rear of the car going out the turn 10 hairpin on the previous lap, and Midmark will know how far he can push to the point where he's going to start to lose control of the car, and that's why he's P2 in the overall and the Pro Championship so far this season. But as they make the way through turn number 13 and into 14, well, Dory just keeping everything under control, and that's the thing when you're the leader. What you have to try and do here is see where your rival gains and respond to it accordingly. And how can you respond? Well, you can do things such as parking the car on apex. It's something which all drivers will try to do when they're battling one another. You essentially just bring the car to a much lower runner pace compared to what you would normally do potentially on a corner apex, and the driver behind then simply has to try and follow you rather than gain time of getting back on the throttle. Now, of course, it's not always liked by the chasing driver, because parking the car on apex, well, it's not the literal connotation of you stop the car dead, but you are intentionally trying to bleed some of the speed out of your own car to prevent the driver behind from gaining speed on the exit, and it does sometimes frustrate the chasing driver, but it's all fair in racing. And as they make the way out to turn number 4, well, Dory right now will be thinking about that. He'll also be thinking about where can he just simply leave the door open and have the confidence that Midmark will not be able to gain the overtaking opportunity, and that'll be on the outside of many a corner, but also the inside into turn number 10. If he goes a bit deep into 10, we've seen that Midmark's had the door open for him a couple of times, but hasn't been able to seize it because how tight the apex is at turn number 10 on the hairpin. So it's all these little bits of information which add up. Meanwhile, conversely, Midmark will be looking at how Dory's driving and thinking, okay, where is he stronger than me, where is he weaker than me, and where are we equal? And where he'll want to try and get on top is where Dory's weaker, he'll want to pressure him into a mistake, and where Dory's potentially stronger, he'll want to try and stay closer than normal in order to have the run into this next sequence of corners. But as they make the way through turn number 14, 7 minutes still on the clock. We've still got a race on our hands here for the lead of this race, and we're going to stay with it, given it's the only battle on the circuit right now, as they make their way down towards turn number 1, side by side this time. But Dory defends the inside line. We've seen this previously, but what can Midmark do differently here to break the stalemate as they make their way through turn number 2? Well, the short answer is he's going to try and cut it back out of 2 this time. Takes a bit more of a gentle approach on the exit, but deciding to go for the earlier apex. Gives him a tenth there as he comes off the corner. He will be within 2 tenths now as he comes down to turn number 3, but not really able to seize any further as he has to back it off there through the first part of the double right-hand sequence. Out of 4 they come. 3 tenths is the delta as they make their way up the hill, but this is where Midmark is absolutely monstrous compared to Dory. He's just able to run these corners so much more aggressively over the curbs, and as they come through turn number 8, well, you can see Midmark within 2.5 tenths. He clears the apex, and now I think Midmark is thinking about moving to 10. Because he gets this close, well, it's all going to be about how bold does he want to be on the brakes. Dory takes a bit of a tight entry line there. Midmark decides to go a bit deeper initially, but in fact compromised the exit line there, loses 3 tenths on exit, and Midmark makes a very rare mistake as they make their way towards turn number 12. And when I say it's a very rare mistake, it's very hard to see it. You have to look at the timing tower to see how that gap has opened up, but Midmark there just simply not carrying the speed he wanted off the corner, and therefore now having to reset himself in position as Dory, I think, now started to really establish himself in the lead of this race. 5 minutes still on the clock by the time they get through turns 1 and 2. This time around, they go on to their 11th lap of racing, and will it be an opportunity for Midmark to come back, or will Dory just simply now establish his foothold and say, I put my stake in the ground and there's no way you're moving me away from the lead? Or as they make the way out, meanwhile we look back to Daniel J. Lewis and the privateer from Welsh M Sport, still not able to find his way into that top 2 battle. He continues to watch from a distance, and I think this might be a bit of frustration for the 88 driver here, in the fact he has come close a couple of times, but whenever he gets close he just seems to be hit by that double wall dirty air, and it just does not bode well for the way he's able to drive the car. It's almost as if he wants to be in clear air permanently, and therefore he'd want to be leading this race and defending rather than being the pursuer. He'd prefer to be the hunted rather than the hunter. And as they come through turn number 7, meanwhile, not to forget about the fact we do have another, 5 drivers in this race. Well, Connor Miles, your prime leader at the moment for Black Flag Bandits in P4, albeit he's lost the view of the top 3. He's now 4 seconds off the top 3, and in return he does have Callum Jenkins approaching him. And here is the Team Hard driver, who's currently at P5, a runner-up spot in the prime class, and gaining on average a couple of attempts a lap, albeit the last lap in fact losing 2 attempts by comparison, and trying to close down a 3.2 second gap to Connor Miles, which started on this lap. And then we do have Daniel Stimman at P6 and 3rd place in the prime class, as he comes on through the kink of turn number 11 there and onwards towards 12, and the privateer right now not quite leading, but still he'll take a double podium from today, when we must look up to the leaders once again, ladies and gentlemen, as we see here Dory defending once more versus Midmark. So Midmark getting the better run out of the final corner, but again everything stops there as they make the way out until or does it. And in fact Midmark get a very good run this time. That gap has come down to 2 tenths. It's going to be less than 2 tenths halfway down the straight. Now can Midmark potentially force it on the inside here into 3? I think he's going to have to go for it if he wants it. He's going to look all in. It's a very tight run into the corner, and Dory gives it the space there, but Dory keeps the car just about together. And as Dory makes way out of turn number 4, well, Midmark's attempt there trying to force a pass did not work, and Dory holds on. And as they make the way up towards turn number 8, by turn number 7, we look back for the rear of Dory's car, but he goes deep. Midmark tries to look for the space on the inside, but then the natural camber of the road sends Midmark's car a little bit wide, and therefore he's not able to get into that inside space. But Midmark now definitely trying to push, I think, cooling down. It's the car before the storm, and now the storm is starting to erupt as he gets even closer coming out of turn number 10. And Midmark trying to seize every little bit of space as they make the way in towards turn number 12. Through the left-hander they go, and as they head up towards 13 and 14, well, now it is for Dory just to try and dig it even further, coming on through the last couple of laps of this race. All of it, I think, he is being pushed to the absolute limit. I think Midmark's attacking prowess is being pushed to the ultimate threshold as well. It's the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, but which one's going to carry out on top here today as they make the way down towards turn 1 this time? Dory defends, but he brings it back to the outside. Meanwhile, Midmark takes a look. He can't get close enough. And as they come into turn number 2, well, they are as they are for now, but they're going to be heading towards turn number 3 with Midmark further back this time, 4 attempts. He will close up, but he won't be able to try and look for a move on the inside. As we say hello there to Iron Rolling in the Twitch chat. And well, I'm not currently racing at the moment, Iron, but maybe later on this year. Staying in the commentary booth for now. But the brilliant racing we see on screen between Dory and Midmark continues to rise to its crescendo. And well, we'll have to wait to see how this all plays. There's only 2 minutes to go. There's this lap at 1 more, but Dory makes a small mistake as he comes through turn number 5 into 6. He catches the car in time, but that side slide there will definitely overheat the tyres. And the problem with that is now for Dory is that Midmark will try and come in full force, knowing that Dory is potentially vulnerable coming down to 10. It's less than 2 tenths. They head to the braking zone. We ride on board with Chris Midmark here as he goes for a late apex. He knows what it's time for. And as they make the way out of 10 up towards 12, he's got to keep setting up these late apexes, these cutback runs now, as Dory continues to feel that pressure. He can't let Dory settle down again. If he settles down, this race is over. And as they make the way through 13 and 14, Dory on the inside, they're slightly compromised run into 14, but Midmark can't get any closer at the moment. He's got to try and get the launch out of the corner, but it's 3 tenths as they head towards the timeline. 1 more lap to go. They'll go into a 14th and final lap in this second race of the day. It's 2.5 tenths between Dory and Midmark. But will it be that way the next time they come around and see the checkered flag? Will Midmark close, but not able to look for it into 1. Dory goes slightly deep through 1. That's to resettle the car into 2. Midmark the closest he's ever going to be as he exits the corner. It's 2 tenths down the corner exit, but he loses out slightly in the acceleration stage there, head up into 4th gear. And now it means that for Midmark, he's going to have to send it here into turn number 3, and he's going to look for it. Midmark goes all in. It's side by side down the hill. Dory turns in, but Midmark is there. He's got the car stopped in time. Dory's made to go deeper and deeper. it's a small moment. It's a little bit of a juggle with the steering wheel there for Dory as they head through turn number 5. It's going to be Midmark outside to inside, and Dory's squirming. He hasn't got the control anymore, and Midmark takes the lead. But will he be still holding on to it? Dory's still there right behind him as they make the way from turn number 8 and up towards turn number 10 they go, and down towards the braking zone, in towards the hairpin. Now Midmark's going to defend here, but Dory's round the outside. He's trying everything, but Dory's throwing everything but the proverbial kitchen sink, and nothing sticking as they make the way through 11. But as they come into the braking zone for 12, Midmark's got to defend. Dory's seen everything he's got as they make the way through the left-hander and up towards 13. 2 corners to go. 1 corner doesn't matter, it's 13. It's all about 14 now. Can Midmark hold on? It looks like he will be able to, as the checker flag awaits and coming out the final corner. And I think Midmark's done it, ladies and gentlemen. As Dory goes wide, Midmark makes it 2 out of 2 in absolutely dramatic fashion here at Rudskogen. He takes the win in race 2 of the day. Jamie Dory P2, Daniel J. Lewis completes your pro and oval podium P3. Connor Miles will come on through to a rather sedate but well-deserved P4 overall and prime win with that, and then it will be Callum Jenkins who finishes P5 for Team Hard, runner-up in the prime class, ahead of Daniel Stewart at P6, who crossed the line there, making it a double podium today for the privateer, and then a bit further back, taking P7 shortly. It will be Mark Sykes, who with Callum Jenkins's performance in the second race of the day will find himself now going into the championship finale at Oran Park on equilibrium between himself and Jenkins. It's going to be a level field in their battle for the Prime Championship crown as Sykes finished P7, P4 in class and a lap down on the field. And we had the one retirement of Vitor Pops, who in the end will be classified as finishing at P8. But my goodness, one absolutely brilliant race between the pair, between Chris Midmark and Jamie Dory, and as they make their way into the pits very shortly on their cool down lap, when you completely understand, I think they have given it everything today, and for Midmark it means so much given the fact this double win puts him right up there batting for the lead of the pro class in the season finale, presuming that Chris Knox will return at the season finale and Midmark is able to make it as well. It's going to be level between the two of them, and Jamie Dory as well gaining major points today in that chase after P3 in the championship. Well, we'll have to wait to see how the standings are when we bring the show in a week's time for round 6 of 6. But definitely we have had a show here today, and whilst we may have only had 8 drivers, they have made this circuit roar as if there's been plenty more. And Connor Miles bringing on home his first win in the prime class. The Black Flag Bandits driver keeping it calm and collected from start to finish, and whilst it may have been lonely for him out there, the points have been accrued. But with that, ladies and gents, well, let's take you through those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries, and here they are. Chris Midmark making it 2 wins out of 2 here today at the Rudskogen Motorsenter circuit, with the Midmark Motorsport driver taking the win by 3.5 tenths to the end over NXTGEN Racing's Jamie Dory P2. Daniel J. Lewis P3 there, round off the oval and pro podium, not quite able to overcome the dirty air off of the cars in front and therefore decided to settle for the podium spot. And then Connor Miles not quite able to make it an overall podium, but he won't mind that when the Black Flag Bandits drivers brought on home a prime class win for the first time this season, 10 seconds clear of his closest rival and prime runner-up Callum Jenkins for Team Hard, and in the prime podium being rounded off by Daniel Stimman, who becomes a double podium finisher for the first time this season with that P3 after his win in race number 1. Finisher lap down P7, Mark Sykes and NXTGEN Racing, and Vitor Pops there listed as P8, but as he was only able to complete what was a grand total of 6 laps, I do believe the privateer will be classified as a non-finisher as he did not complete over half the race distance. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes all of our racing for today, and what a thriller we have had at Rudskogen, it's no doubt about it. But we must now leave the Norwegian circuit, and it is time for us to say that's all of our racing, and now for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed the racing today and you want to know more about the NXTGEN Racing community, and perhaps just out there thinking that you want to be on the grid for one of our future series or one of our ongoing series, or perhaps you just want to know a little bit more about our series that are upcoming or ongoing, then why not go firstly to our official website, and that may be found at www.nextgenracing.co.uk. And as our website appears on screen very shortly, well, it is the home of clean and fair sim racing for all. And at NXTGEN Racing, we have been hosting leagues for over 16.5 years on PC and console, and we have had a whole variety of series, and some have been highly successful throughout the years. And with our current series, including the Formula Fixed FF1600 series, which you've seen today, the NXTGEN Season 3, or the NXTGEN Racing Touring Car Championship, which aims to mirror closely the British Touring Car Championship, or our Clio Cup front-wheel drive Friday series, well, they're our ongoing series, and we also do have the upcoming return of the GT3 Championship at the end of June, alternatively, in what is a month's time, effectively, in 2023, and we also have the endurance version of the Proto GT3 Championship coming back as of early July. We've also got a couple of other series in the plan for later this year, and we've got plenty to look forward to, and we'd love to see you on the grid. But perhaps you don't want to go to our website necessarily, and perhaps you want to go and follow us on social media. More to do so, all you need to do is go to our official Facebook group, and that may be found at facebook.com/groups/NextGen Racing, and there you can get up to date with all the latest information. You can also engage with the admins at NextGen Racing and find out about what we do both on the virtual circuit and also the real circuit, because many may not know that we also do have a number of individuals who race on the real world circuit and also work as marshals at multiple events around the UK. But whether you're looking for real or virtual motorsport, the racing here today on the virtual simulator has been absolutely phenomenal, and it has set us up with a fantastic season finale. Speaking of which, come back as of Thursday, the 1st of June 2023, ladies and gentlemen, because that's when round 6 will be taking place, and we'll be bringing it to you all live from trackside in Australia as we revive the now defunct Oran Park circuit, and we see our drivers take on the Grand Prix layout for what is the finale of the season. 2 races to go and 2 championships to be settled. In the pro and overall category jointly, we have the battle between Chris Midmark and Chris Knox, which is going down to the wire. Meanwhile, in the Pram class, it's even Stevens between Mark Sykes and what is, I do believe, Callum Jenkins, and between the 2 pairs of drivers, only one of each pair will come out on top and take the championship crown. Save the date, Thursday the 1st of June. You want to miss it. But until then, we have been Next Gen Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay well, stay safe, stay smiling, but most importantly, as well as having a fantastic bank holiday weekend, remember to stay on track. Good night.